A miracle. No unit, wing, or asylum could ever give such an outstanding report. Your way worked. And all you've got for it is contempt. A kick in the face. Well said, Charles Bronson. Not just you, but every member of staff on the teachers too. And let's not forget the cons. It could have been a success without it could not have been a success without their cooperation. My spells on Sea Wing over the years have not been quite as successful, but that was down to my own personal problems, nothing to do with yourself. I know it will be a bad blow for many who will now be lost and have nothing more than a hell existence, a solitary survival, and all for trying to help themselves to be normal people. It won't surprise me if one or two may now be suicidal. All will feel betrayed and will feel bitter. Some will return to violence as their last resort. But you know better than anybody it's a sign of the times to put us in cages and forget us completely. Bob, for me, there's been nothing. I've worked at myself so hard. I wrote an award-winning book. I've even become a cartoonist. I've also found peace in my Islamic way of life. But in my last 3 years of multiple transfers, it's gradually driven me to feel more persecuted. I was driven mad in the 1970s and now experiencing the exact effects now. Lost, paranoid, confused, periods of depression, violent thoughts. As much as I've tried and put into changing my ways, the system seems destined to keep me isolated and on the move. Recently, I jumped on a doctor. I was overpowered. I am now facing another court case, no doubt more years. But nobody asks why Bronson takes hostages. Well, the answer is, Bob, I am a very effed up guy, desperate. It's the emptiness of never knowing when I will be moved, or where to. It's the desperation of life itself. Never seeing other cons, never seeing a TV. Having my family drift away, it's irreversible damage. All the system has done up to now is make my problems manifest, cause the violence. Take today, I arrived here at Full Sutton Seg Block on the 3rd of Jan. Told I'm only here for 28 days, now it's 33. So how do I tell my family to come and see me if I may move any hour? How do I settle? I'm just locked up in a cell. I don't take exercise. I don't take showers. I may use 2 or 3 words in a day, if that. There is no stability. There is nobody to trust. So my journey continues on until I'm too far gone to even trust good people. I made my wishes clear to you. I was hoping for a return to C Unit, as I felt I was ready for another chance. Lots of screws in various blocks also said it's high time I came off of this movement. You said we will move every 3 months. Well, I move every few weeks. All I can say is, Bob, and I speak for all the guys in the system, such as myself, guys who put the whole lot into your works, your leaving is a great loss to us all. I wish you well in your next project. You earned our respect and trust. Now we are back to square one. Respect, Charlie Bronson. P.S. Life is a bitch, and then you're born. There is no end, only a beginning. Oh my goodness, what a introduction, Bob, and huge shout out and thank you to Charles Bronson for that. By way of introduction, I know you want to give the backstory to that letter, but perhaps could you go way back and tell us how you were first introduced to Charles Bronson?
So no problem.
Thanks.
My background is I've always been interested in psychiatry. To me, it's the queen of the medical sciences and should be prominent right at the top. But in the course of my career, eventually I was able to deflect people from giving shock treatment. As a very junior, you do what you're told and you give people shock treatment. So when I was in a position to control that, I deflected people from it because I think it's a barbaric treatment and it should be outlawed. And unfortunately, the consultant I was working with at the time took this badly and blocked any further promotion in psychiatry. I was destined for a career in psychiatry and he blocked it. There was no way forward. So I moved, as I could do then, into general practice. I had 3 children and I moved into general practice and continued to study childhoods. I knew there was something there, I didn't know what it was. After 19 years, people saying, "You're doing all right, Dr. Bob, you're doing all right." And I think, well what do they know, But after a while, I was able to address the fear in one particular patient. And what was striking about that was she had emotional problems. She was a 40-year-old, grossly overweight, with blood pressure. And she came to see my practice nurse, and I said, "Would you be interested in working out some of the emotional background?" And she said, "Yes." So we talked together an hour a week for 6 months. And we weren't making a lot of progress. And so I cut it down. I cut it down to half an hour. I thought, well, I've got a lot of other stuff to do. And we got to minute 29, and she suddenly started opening up. I thought, oh, shit. So I had to decide what was important. And what was important for me was working out where this gross obesity came from, if it was an emotional cause. And so I went back to an hour. Very significant, because she must have concluded this man isn't going away. Mm-hmm. So then she said, when I was 6, did I ever tell you a story? When I was 6, my mother took me upstairs with the brothers and sisters, shut the bedroom door, pushed the furniture up against it, and my father came up the stairs with a hatchet, bashed holes in the door, said, "I'll bloody kill you all." I said, "No, you didn't." And it's the dog that didn't bark. For 9 months, she never told me, and that's because she couldn't tell herself. So in that 9 months, I'd built up such trust, I now see, that she was able to overcome the barriers that she'd built up for self-protection. Because we used to argue. She said, "The hatch is still there, you fool." I said, "No, it's not." "Yes, it is." "No, it's not." So arguing on that. And the reason it was so significant for me and why I was so confident was her father had died 4 years before. He was part of the family doctoring that I'd done. So it's a unique situation. And it took that long and that dedication. And also what I will say at this point is it was all on the NHS. I didn't charge her and she didn't pay me. Now, if there'd been a financial motive, either benefit to me or cost to her, it would have interfered. But it was just purely clinical research, which is very difficult to obtain these days, but it breaks. So then I thought, wow, what happens is that the person themselves blocks the one crucial event and they can't describe it. And later, I dealt one or two other patients with it, and there was one woman who I was talking to her, and at that time I had a quite elaborate phrase. I said, "Hello, parent, I'm terrified of you. I don't need to be, I'm an adult." So she said, I said, "An empty chair, sit, I can't remember, mum or dad, sit your mum there." And she turned to me and she said, she repeated it verbatim to me, there. And then instantaneous, bonk, gone. In the presence or the fear of one parent or other. And that's the key. So what you have to do is to establish a powerful bond, a trustworthy bond. Because if you're weak, then the abuser will eat you for breakfast. If you're strong, you'll just repeat the abuse, unless they can trust you. You have to have the confidence that there's something really serious going on, and you can tell by whatever they've done, murder, obviously, serial killers, whatever it is, you can tell by the size of the aberration that something serious has gone wrong. Because what I learned in Parkhurst was that these psychopaths, so-called, had all been born lovable, sociable, and non-violent. And something, which they couldn't tell you, had gone wrong. And eventually they could tell you.
That was actually the model that Bob was taking into Parkhurst.
I took that model into
But
Parkhurst.
he didn't actually know it would work. But it was the model he was absolutely convinced would work, but we didn't know, and I didn't know. And I remember when I remember saying to you, well, if your model's right, it'll work in Parkhurst. It'll work with the most dangerous, the most severe, the most damaged people. So...
if it works there, it should work anywhere.
And it'll work, yeah, and if it works in Parkhurst, it'll work anywhere.
Did you have any fears of Bob working with people who murdered people?
Yes, I did. I mean, I've written about my fears in the book and how I approached it, and how I managed to be all right with it somehow. And basically, I remember saying to Bob at one time, I actually need to see the men. I need to see.
What's happening?
Need to see
how it
the men,
works.
so I can trust that what Bob's doing is okay, because Bob knew he could trust himself, and he knew his model, but I didn't. So I did go into the prison and talk to some of the men and see them. And I described what I saw.
I think at this point we have to say why I went to Parkhurst in the first place.
Yes.
And I wouldn't have gone if Sue's college friend hadn't married the then governor. John Marriott was the youngest governor of the flagship prison, which Parkhurst was in those days. He was the youngest governor, and he was liberal. And we visited in February of 91, family friends. He says, come down, we've moved to Isle of Wight, come and have a look. So I thought, well, if we don't go, it's back and beyond, we'll never go. So we went, and over the weekend, he said to me, he said, well, we're looking for a psychiatrist. I thought, yeah, well, he would. Who wants to work in a dungeon? But he was conversing with his brother-in-law and other people there, and he sounded liberal. So I thought, well, having decided never to work in a large institution because they're toxic, I thought, well, I'll make an exception if I know the man at the top. So when they start yanking my chain, I can say, John, come and sort, you know. So that's how we went.
Well, it isn't exactly how we went, because Bob went down to see the prison and John and the prisoners, and then he rang me up, and I was working at the university in Manchester then, and he rang me up in my office there, and he said, I think I might have to work here. And I thought, will you come and see, you see? So I thought, yeah, I mean, Bob never says an idle word. So I knew it was serious, he really would. And so I went down and I went into C Wing, and saw the men.
When you say the men, what class of prisoner were they? What categories and what crimes?
They were all men. Basically, C Wing was set up for the psychiatrically disturbed, dangerous, extremely violent men that Broadmoor couldn't handle. So they were too dangerous for Broadmoor.
Wow.
So
it had been going about 5 years then.
Yeah.
And it followed some serious riots in Manchester in the 80s, early 80s, and they thought, it's a nice idea, we'll take the ringleaders out so that to cut the risk of, and put the ringleaders in the special units. So this was I think there were 4 or 5 special units at that time around the country, Hull and various places, and Parkhurst was the top of the pile.
So was Alan Lord in there then? Because we had him on. He was one of the Strange Ways rioters.
No.
Was this before that?
no, they were all deemed psychiatric problems.
The qualifications for admission were...
I mean, I described the drugs they were on when we first went in, and they were just lines of sort of...
Zombies.
Yeah, I mean, I went down...
Really, the misery was just... palpable, the misery and the sort of threat. It was a bit like they were so guarded. It was just like an explosion could happen any minute, but most of the time it was just bored misery. But what did happen on that occasion, and I still wonder whether I'd have made a different decision if this hadn't happened. We were walking down the wing, and I was sort of hanging back, sort of looking round. And this young man clattered down from the wands, down the metal staircase. he wore a blue jumper and sunglasses, I remember. He took his sunglasses off, walked straight up to me.
Past the governor.
Past all these
everyone else.
others. Took his sunglasses off and said, "Will you let him come?
Incredible.
Will you let him come?" And I
That-
just thought the appeal was just so... I just...
See, what had happened
I
was...
just sort of slightly nodded, and he was satisfied, and he went back up the... And that's... and I just... so, a year later, I took an early retirement deal from the university and came back to join Bob.
Because what I'd done is in the February went down and we had this chat, and then I visited the 1st of May. I'd promised to visit John's prison in Lewis when he was governor there, and I never got round to it. But I thought, all right, then I'll go. So I went to the 1st of May, and they were just shuffling like the backwards of the psychiatric wing when I did my training, or like general practice patients. I thought, these aren't people with
No,
horns.
not quite
They haven't
like...
got they haven't got a tail. I'll come back again. So I came back again, and then rang Sue and said, I might have to work here.
Did you think I'd say no?
No, of course not.
See, there you go.
No, I mean,
No.
I'd made this breakthrough, as I thought, that the person in front of you is the main problem. They have all the problems of the symptoms and so on, violence and stuff, but they've got the barrier, and until you remove the barrier, you're not going to get anywhere.
So you're going in to test this out. What was your initial challenges?
Well, it was very interesting. One of the challenges with the staff, the officers, right? So I go in there and I said, I want to be called Bob. Oh, no, you're Dr. Johnson. You're Dr. Johnson. I said, no, I'm not. Because one of the problems is the parental figment or the parental image from the past was the one where all the damage is. So I'm not an authority. I'm an emotional plumber. I'm on their level, helping them to deal with. Sometimes I couldn't make that bridge, but where I could, that's what I was. I was looking at the problem with them, not at them or putting them down. I was trying to grow them up emotionally. So there was a big discussion about that. I said, oh, all right, Dr. Bob. So they said, all right, Dr. Bob. So we compromised. And what's really curious is in the interview with my star prisoner, Lenny, he said, if you'd call yourself Dr. Johnson, I'd have naught to do with you. So it was confirmed. But I mean, that's right. I'm not solving the problems. I'm giving them a treatment so they can solve it. And it's like any educator anywhere. I can do maths, I can do this, I can do that. But unless I transfer the skill, you haven't done anything. So back to the first week. I started on July the 1st. It was a Monday, 1991. And by Thursday, I'd interviewed all the prisoners on C Wing, which is my only technical job. I'd interviewed them all the ones that agreed to see me, because I only saw them by consent. The officer said, shall we send them in? Shall we say, no. I said, if they don't consent, I don't want to see them. If they consent or not, that's up to them. So I got my notes and I'd finished on the Thursday. And on the Friday, the mischievous governor, John Marriott, said, right, now, Friday morning, I want you to go to the SEG and see Charlie Bronson. Nothing to do with me. Quite a different area of the prison. Not my responsibility at all. Go and see, I don't know what was in his mind. Well, I do. I'll come on to that. So there was a table, which wasn't quite wide enough in the event, a large room, and a very muscular officer looking through the glass door. I'll be in if there's any trouble. I thought, fun chance. So we're chatting on, and I got on very well with Charlie until right at the end, or towards the end, I put a foot wrong. I can't remember quite what it was. It was something to do with, I think he said he had some sort of epilepsy, and I said I didn't take a lot of notice of it. So he said, so he reached across, grabbed my entire notes. These are my notes, he said. I said, just the top two, Charlie. So he peeled off the top too, handed my week's work, handed it back to me, and then shredded it up into postage-sized things. He says that in one of his letters. It's astonishing. And the upshot from that was, 10 years or so later, his solicitor said, "Could I have the references when you first examined him?" I said, "Well, they're all in a waste paper basket on the what I did then with Charlie was establish him as an equal in that sense, and somebody who could help him.
I wrote about that incident in the book and how scared I actually was when I realised that Bob had been sent in to sit with Charlie on his own without any Anyway, I wrote about it and what happened. So years later, when I finished writing the book, I sent a draft to Charlie because I wanted to see what he thought about it. But I was a bit nervous because I thought he might not like what I'd written or anything. Anyway, his response absolutely staggered me. And he wrote quite a few letters back to me. And one of the things he said was that we inside don't often think of those over the walls and how they're suffering. And, he said it's that perspective, he said, is really important. And, I wish I'd brought the letters in because I could have read out some of those. But and then he's written a foreword to the book.
Fantastic.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
And how he's retained his humanity and also empathy, because he said it was realistic what I was writing about, my fears. Bob could have come home in a body bag, he said. Because he knew. And really important to me that the men, as it were, could relate to what I'd written. So, when Charlie showed me they could.
Which leads to my next point then. So we have a lot of viewers in America. And in America, if you're going to access the highest security, most dangerous prisoners, it's like when Clarice Starling first meets Hannibal Lecter. They're behind a plexiglass screen. They can't access you. You said you're going and sitting down in a room with them with no guard?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not having people eavesdrop on confidential stuff. No.
But what about the risk to yourself of doing that? You're going into an unknown.
Well, it's very curious. Obviously, I'm a general practitioner, some experience in psychiatry. I'm going in there. And after about 12 or 18 months, you learn to read violence. There's not, whatever it's going to be, and you learn to read it. And my most dangerous prisoner, no question, was Robert Maudsley. And I saw him on my first trip round. He was in a single cell, and he was a gaunt, Moses type feel, long hair, miserable as sin.
Could you explain to the viewers what Mausley's crimes were?
Robert Maudsley was, in fact, at that time, probably the most dangerous prisoner in the prison system. He was a serial killer, had been a serial killer, and had killed, I think, 4 times in prison or something like this, and no understanding either on his part or on the system. So I noted him. He was actually in Parkhurst when I first went in 91, and he was on the hospital wing. He wasn't in C wing.
But at that time, you weren't allowed to. You couldn't go in and sit with him at all.
I spent. It was unusual for me. I spent a diplomatic campaign with the chief medical officer. So I had a coffee morning with him every morning, and gradually I was working to get his permission to see Robert Maudsley.
So it's a great ambition.
And I thought, well, give it a go. If I can reach him, I've got to reach him. And so I'm passing through the hospital on another occasion, and he's got these wire mesh things. And we start chatting, and he says, if I had a friend who had this sort of problem, what would you do? I said, well, I would talk to your friend, this sort of stuff. We knew what we were talking about it. And I said, would you be interested? And he said, well, my friend probably would be interested, this sort of thing. So that was the background to it. Then I got to the chief medical officer's permission. And I sat, the prison cell was, 10 feet by 6, something like that, and the bed's there and the door's here. So I sat on the end of the bed near the door, and he's at that end. And he says, my hands are getting sweaty. I said, if you frighten me, I can't help you. Now, that was a breakthrough for me. I was probably 18 months there, because it meant I had confidence on my behalf that I had something to offer and it could help him. So he calmed down. But that was the case. I said, I'm near the door. I'm out of the door before you can get off your bed, and so he went. And he was making sterling progress. We'd probably get on to him, but we were making incredible progress. We were unpacking his appalling childhood.
How did you break the ice with him then?
What you do is you, as it were, lay things out on the table, see which way they pick up. And he used to get very agitated. He said, I think he had something like sort of, I have a protector and he's coming in now. He's getting, so I said, I'd back off. And we got it gently. And do you want me to come again? All by consent. Do you want me to come again? All right then. And we did, I think, monthly to begin with, and then gradually more. And I've got some notes from him. And he eventually said, I see these things quite differently than a few months ago.
So you build a bond.
Yes.
And then you get them jointly, you and him, to examine the trauma. Is that how it works?
Yeah. What happens is they put the trauma in a box.
Yeah.
And they're the only people who can open the box. Now, if they open the box prematurely, that's the end of them. They're dead. They're dead. So they don't open the box. Now, my message to them, the box is empty, The box is empty, The box is empty. Do they trust you? Do they believe you? Oh, well, that wasn't so bad. That wasn't bad. Whoo! If you can open the box and blow it all away, it goes 100%. But there's all this, exactly. There's a whole lot of stuff in between. And it's a skill. You go in there and you read the signs that they're pushing you back. So you go back and you put it into third person, or you dilute the message. But basically, what I want them to do is to, and I've developed it more since, is to say, you can't do that anymore. I'm an adult, whatever it was. I'm not interested in what it was. You can't do that anymore. I'm an adult. And they don't believe that. They do not believe that things have changed from the age of 2 or the age of 3 or whatever it was. They do not believe it. I mean, so that's an insight on my part that I have to convey to them. So I have to say, you're a grown lad. There's only 2 people in the room. What's happening? Are you frightened? Yes, I am, yes. Well, why? There's only 2 of us here. Really? Try it. And as they try it,